250% for dairy products. Tariff.
When Donald Trump introduced his sweeping tariff strategy under the America First banner, the message was straightforward: protect U.S. industries and bring jobs back home. But one industry now facing serious uncertainty is dairy. This sector isn't just symbolic of American agriculture. It generates over $50 billion a year and supports hundreds of thousands of jobs across key states like Wisconsin, California, and New York. For many rural communities, milk, butter, and cheese are not just food products, they're economic lifelines. International trade plays a critical role in keeping the U.S. dairy industry stable. Domestic consumers can't absorb all the dairy produced in the country, so exporting is essential for maintaining farm income. Mexico and Canada have long been the top two buyers of American dairy products. But as Trump intensified global tariff battles, the very policies meant to shield U.S. producers are now endangering these crucial markets. At first glance, dairy hasn't been directly targeted by new U.S. tariffs. Most duties focused on steel, aluminum, copper, semiconductors, and various imports. However, global trade doesn't function in isolation. When the U.S. raises trade barriers, other countries often respond in kind. That's where the risk to dairy begins. In 2024, Mexico and Canada together bought nearly $3.7 billion worth of American dairy, according to USDA data. For now, that trade remains intact, but the political landscape is shifting. Back in 2018, Mexico imposed tariffs on U.S. cheese in retaliation for American steel duties. And more recently, Mexican officials again hinted that dairy could be on the list if trade talks break down. Canada, meanwhile, has consistently defended its supply management system for milk, eggs, and poultry. Even though Ottawa paused some retaliatory tariffs in September 2025 to keep negotiations moving forward, it remains firm on protecting its dairy quotas. The ongoing discussions reflect this tension. Mexico is currently observing a 90-day pause to avoid an immediate escalation, but agricultural goods, including dairy, are still on the table if the U.S. ramps up pressure. Canada has reopened communication channels, but Prime Minister Mark Carney has made it clear the country won't dismantle its existing dairy structure. In this uncertain climate, U.S. milk and cheese exports risk becoming bargaining chips in broader trade disputes. While there haven't been new restrictions yet, the threat of them hangs over every shipment. Canada, in the meantime, is exploring closer trade ties with Mexico, as both nations work toward a more stable agreement amid unpredictable U.S. policies under President Trump. Imagine what could happen if both neighbors decide to retaliate. It's a hypothetical for now, not official policy, but the numbers show how exposed the U.S. dairy industry really is. According to the USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service, American dairy exports to Mexico were around $2.5 billion in 2024, with Canada adding another $1.2 billion. Together, that's $3.7 billion in trade. If new tariffs of 10% were applied, exports could drop by 6 to 10%, wiping out about $300 million in sales. At 25%, losses could rise to around $700 million. And at 50%, the industry could take a $1.5 billion hit, erasing a significant portion of its annual growth. Not all dairy products would be affected equally. Cheese, which is one of the fastest growing export categories, would likely take the hardest hit. Mexico is the US's biggest cheese customer, but if prices rise, competitors like Europe and New Zealand are ready to fill the gap. In Canada, where U.S. access is already restricted by tariff rate quotas, further retaliation would only tighten those limits. For dairy farmers in states like Wisconsin and California, this would mean fewer markets and narrower profit margins, while foreign rivals gain ground. The irony is clear: the tariffs meant to defend American industries might end up hurting the very people they were designed to protect. Canada is taking a measured approach, while Mexico uses ongoing negotiations as leverage. Both countries still have tools they can use to restrict U.S. milk, butter, and cheese. For now, dairy hasn't been directly targeted, but it's in a fragile spot, just one policy move away from becoming a casualty. If even dairy, long seen as the cornerstone of American farming, becomes collateral damage in this trade war, it raises a tough question. Are these tariffs really protecting American agriculture, or are they starting to backfire? Meanwhile, another major industry is also showing signs of strain: tourism in Las Vegas. This summer, the city has seen a sharp downturn, costing billions. Behind the glittering lights of the Strip, the signs of trouble are clear. Crowds are smaller, hotel workers are making half the tips they earned last year, and simple purchases like drinks now leave visitors with sticker shock. Local officials reported an 11% drop in visitor numbers for June alone. In a city that relies on constant tourist traffic, that kind of decline translates into billions of dollars lost. And once again, the question echoes: are President Trump's tariffs and stricter border rules slowly choking off the lifeblood of U.S. tourism? The administration has relied heavily on tariffs as a display of economic strength. But these policies, along with tighter immigration enforcement, are now colliding with one of America's most visible and vulnerable industries. Is Las Vegas in real trouble? Or is it just hype? Many locals say the downturn is real. Tourists are staying away, not just because of the economy, but because of the soaring prices. Visitors look at the bills and say, "I'm paying this much for that? I don't see the value." Las Vegas is emerging as a clear warning sign. The city's mayor confirmed that the number of Canadian visitors flying in has plummeted by 40% this year. That's a massive drop for a market that once provided a steady stream of guests. The impact is visible across the board. Casinos, restaurants, and shops are all feeling the pinch. It shows up in paychecks too. Restaurant workers who used to make $150 to $200 a day in tips are now taking home just $50 to $60. Yes, tourists are still spending, but with fewer of them and with higher prices on everything from hotels to drinks, many are rethinking future visits. Industry experts in Nevada warn that simply raising prices won't solve the problem. Las Vegas, a city that once built its name on offering value and entertainment, is now losing the very appeal that made it special. Prices are up, visitors are down, and the overall experience no longer feels like a bargain. Meanwhile, a shift is happening across the border. For the first time since 2006, excluding the pandemic years, more Americans are visiting Canada than Canadians are coming to the US. It's a notable reversal. Canadians are increasingly cutting back on trips south, and the numbers show it. US Customs and Border Protection recorded 2.4 million land entries from Canada into the United States in July 2025, which is about 500,000 fewer than the same time last year. The drop has been so significant that duty-free shops along the border are feeling the squeeze. According to the Frontier Duty-Free Association, sales in July were still down nearly 37%. One long-standing shop in New Brunswick even shut down after more than 40 years of service. But while border towns are seeing challenges, Canada itself is adapting. Statistics Canada confirmed that in June and July, more Americans crossed into Canada than Canadians traveled to the US families. Baseball fans and summer travelers are increasingly choosing Canadian destinations. Canada's image as a stable and welcoming country is clearly resonating, not just with trade partners, but with everyday travelers. Prime Minister Mark Carney's calm, patient approach is paying off. The lesson here is telling. President Trump's tariffs were meant to project strength, but their ripple effects are hurting American industries like tourism. From Las Vegas to border shopping centers, the US is seeing a decline in Canadian visitors who once came in strong numbers. At the same time, Canada is benefiting simply by staying steady. More Americans are heading north, and Canada is quietly gaining ground. While Trump's tough stance may make the US seem less welcoming, Canada's consistent and open message is proving effective. In this situation, resilience and calm are winning out over confrontation. The big question now is, can the United States afford to keep pushing people and trade partners away, while Canada turns caution into opportunity? Meanwhile, another major development is shaking the economic landscape. President Trump has dramatically expanded his steel and aluminum tariffs, raising them to 50% and applying them to 47 additional product categories. What started as tariffs on raw materials now includes car parts, refrigerators, baby strollers, and even aluminum used in soda cans. This expansion is no small move. It directly affects the cost of everyday goods, meaning American families are likely to see higher grocery bills, more expensive vehicles, and rising prices in many areas. It also disrupts the supply chains of U.S. trading partners like Canada, especially in sectors that depend on metal components and packaging. For many Americans, this doesn't just feel like a trade policy, it feels like a hit to their wallets. While the administration argues that foreign exporters will bear the cost, data tells a different story. CNN reports that import prices spiked in July, and economic analysts agree. U.S. businesses and consumers are shouldering nearly all the burden. Supply chain experts estimate that the expanded tariffs now impact around $320 billion worth of goods, adding approximately $160 billion in extra costs to the U.S. economy. That's a massive weight, especially at a time when inflation is already a concern. Industries tied to steel and aluminum are already responding. Farmers and construction companies rely on machinery like tractors, pumps, and gearboxes, products now hit by these tariffs. Legacy manufacturer John Deere has already announced layoffs at 3 plants in the Midwest, citing lower sales and increased production costs due to tariffs. When companies like this make cuts, the ripple effects hit local economies hard. The administration says its goal is to rebuild the American steel and aluminum sectors. But experts argue that such a rebuild takes years of investment and policy consistency, neither of which is currently happening. Economists describe the situation as Trumpian uncertainty, a climate where businesses hesitate to invest or hire because rules can change suddenly without warning. Trump's latest move hasn't gone unchallenged. Canada is responding on 2 levels. At the provincial level, Ontario Premier Doug Ford has taken a combative stance, calling the tariffs a hidden tax on American families. He pointed out that Canada buys over $350 billion worth of U.S. goods annually and launched a $70 million program to support Canadian workers. He also urged Ottawa to tighten steel import quotas and promised not to back down. On the federal side, Prime Minister Carney has taken a more measured approach. He has directed financial support toward key sectors like agriculture and lumber, while keeping communication with Washington open. Carney has made it clear that Canada won't settle for a short-term fix that weakens its long-term economic interests. Together, Ford and Carney represent 2 sides of a united front. Across Canada, provinces, industries, unions, and political leaders are aligning behind a single message. Canada will defend its workers and won't be cornered into a bad trade deal. This expanded round of tariffs is more than a simple policy change. For U.S. consumers, it means paying more at a time when many are already stretched thin. For businesses, it introduces even more instability, making it harder to plan for the future. And for North American trade as a whole, it adds friction in a region that once thrived on cooperation. For Canada, the response to ongoing trade and economic pressures has been resilience. Both the federal government and provincial leaders are stepping up to support workers and strengthen supply chains, sending a clear message: Canada will not accept a one-sided deal. While President Trump's tariff strategy continues to rattle global markets, it also reveals which countries are prepared to stand their ground. The next few months will be critical in determining whether these tariffs truly strengthen domestic industry or simply prove, once again, that trade wars rarely create clear winners. At the same time, another issue is raising concerns, this time in the world of sports and international travel. Questions are mounting about how President Trump's travel ban might affect athletes and fans planning to attend major events in the U.S. Trump's executive order, issued in June 2025, banned travelers from 19 countries, 12 under a full ban and 7 under partial restrictions. While athletes, coaches, and their immediate families are exempt, international fans are not. With the 2026 World Cup fast approaching, a tournament jointly hosted by the United States, Canada, and Mexico, these restrictions could have real consequences. FIFA anticipates 6.5 million visitors, and over $11 billion in revenue from the event, most of it tied to games held on US soil. But Trump's policies could jeopardize those gains. Iran has already qualified for the tournament, and other teams from countries like Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, and Libya, some of which are affected by the travel ban, still have a shot at joining. Fans from these nations will not be allowed into the US, meaning their teams may compete without their home country supporters. Beyond the bans, visa processing has become another hurdle. Delays are stretching for months in many US consulates, and the State Department itself has warned travelers to apply as early as possible. These logistical issues threaten to undermine one of the World Cup's greatest strengths: the ability to bring people from all over the world together. The economic risks are significant. While group stage matches will take place in Canada and Mexico, most of the high-profile late-stage games, including semifinals and the final, are scheduled for US cities like Los Angeles, Dallas, and New York. If international fans can't get in, those stadiums may end up filled mostly with local spectators. That could reduce tourism income, hotel bookings, and local business profits. FIFA's revenue projections hinge on strong attendance and spending in the US. Even a small drop in foreign visitors could cost billions. What was intended as an America First policy could end up being a case of America loses first. Meanwhile, Canada is preparing to seize the opportunity. Canadian officials estimate the country could see a $2 billion boost to its GDP and up to $4 billion in total economic output from hosting part of the tournament. About 25,000 jobs are expected to be created. Toronto and Vancouver will host 13 matches, supported by more than $220 million in joint federal and provincial funding. Toronto alone has committed $380 million to improve stadiums, public transit, and training facilities in preparation for the event. If international fans decide it's too difficult to enter the US, those numbers could rise even higher. Prime Minister Mark Carney has focused on a strategy of openness and reliability. Without needing to confront the US directly, Canada is positioning itself as the easier, friendlier destination. By simply being stable and welcoming, Ottawa could end up seeing an even greater return on its World Cup investment. Mexico, with several host cities of its own, stands to benefit similarly if fans shift their travel plans. Rather than isolating the US from the world, Trump's restrictive policies may be boosting Canada's and Mexico's appeal. Since Trump returned to office, the US has seen a steep drop in international tourism, with inbound travel projected to decline by 8.7% in 2025. If global fans decide to skip American venues altogether, it would only widen that gap. The contrast between leaders couldn't be clearer. Trump has chosen a hardline stance on immigration and border policy, even at the cost of damaging the US's global role in hosting the World Cup. In contrast, Carney continues to project patience, calm, and openness, quietly turning Canada into a top destination for international visitors. Instead of one country dominating the benefits of this global event, both Canada and Mexico may end up securing more attention, more spending, and more economic rewards. The 2026 World Cup won't just be a showcase of soccer. It will be a reflection of political choices. The United States may have the stadiums and marquee matches, but its travel policies risk turning an advantage into a liability. Canada is ready to welcome the fans who can't get into the US. This tournament could be remembered not just for its goals and champions, but for the lesson it teaches. When one country closes its doors, others are ready to open theirs and gain.